low pressure that's going to bring more unsettled weather as we go through Saturday. Still the chance of more winteriness, but signs that Sunday is going to turn drier, albeit stay rather cloudy. Before then, we see the return to some more unsettled weather to start the working week. Temperatures rising a little bit too. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain's Newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
Are you across this microaggression story?
I'm across microaggressions. I'm also across XL bullies.
You would not last 5 minutes.
Oh, for God's sake, civil servants, give me strength.
So civil servants have been taught not to roll their eyes, something you do very well. We both do it quite a lot, actually.
Because it's seen as an act of microaggression. This, by the way, this costs the taxpayer, this training, £160,000. What the hell is going on in our woke civil service? Who cares if someone rolls their eyes in exasperation?
What the hell is going on in our civil service, full stop, if the way that civil servants are communicating with each other is rolling their eyes and looking at their phones? I mean, is the government being run by people who are essentially acting to each other like stroppy teenagers?
Yeah.
But I'm all right with people, because, you see, I would be in defence of eye rolling.
So me too, I couldn't care less.
But do you know why? Because I want people to give me their genuine reaction, as long as it's not deeply offensive. But I want to know how people feel. And what they're being told here, civil servants are being taught, and of course this is an area of employment law, because people are taking cases against their bosses who roll their eyes at them. They're saying they're being encouraged to say nothing and nod their heads to promote transparency and inclusion. Don't show what you really think, just nod your head.
But I think that comes with then saying what you really think, and this is the key problem, and what these courses are trying to establish. And I looked into some of them when I was researching this, and it's not saying hide what you're feeling. It's saying, rather than huffing and puffing and rolling your eyes, if you've got a disagreement with someone, say I've got a disagreement with someone. Because otherwise, you can't have an effective workplace if people are sort of just passively, aggressively huffing at each other.
Why do these civil servants need to be taught this? Why do people need to be taught this? This is just normal discourse in a normal working day. You don't need a seminar on it.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's 6 o'clock and I'm Michelle Dewberry. Coming up tonight, new migration and visa figures have been released today, and I can tell you right now, everybody, it is not looking pretty for the government, and we'll get stuck into all of that. Also tonight, the first part of a report into the absolute disgrace that is Wayne Couzens has been released. It is absolutely damning. He should never, ever have been a police officer. Multiple failings spanning multiple years and multiple forces. So let me ask you now, do you trust that things will actually be different going forward? Also, Rishi Sunak says mob rule is replacing democracy. Prime Minister, you don't say. Where have you been? Also tonight, removing non-dom status is a speciality of the Labour Party. But hang on a second, because today there's a rumour that the Tories are going to be scrapping that in the budget next month. So I'm asking you, is that the right decision or not? And what would scrapping mean to the Labour Party? And I got to confess, everybody, I hear some absolutely ridiculous things in this job, but today takes the biscuit because the school has now apparently changed its uniform policy to allow students to wear fake eyelashes to school. This is because some of them were taking time off to go and get their eyelashes put on and off, and apparently saying not being able to wear them affects their mental health. Viewers, I promise you, I've heard it all. Indeed, that is all to come. But before we get stuck in, let's cross live to Polly Middlehurst for tonight's latest news headlines.
Michelle, thank you, and good evening to you. Well, the Home Secretary has today told MPs police officers will be automatically suspended if they're charged with certain criminal offences. The comments come after the Sarah Everard inquiry found Wayne Couzens should never have been a police officer. He killed the 33-year-old in South London in March 2021, and her family says she died because she would never have got into a stranger's car if he hadn't been a police officer. Inquiry Chair Ailish Angelini has warned that without a radical overhaul of policing practices and culture, there's still nothing to stop another Couzens operating in plain sight. Met Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley says the force is trying to learn from its mistakes.
What this report does, it paints a deeply disturbing picture of us starting from an astonishingly low base. And that's what we're moving on from. And we have made progress. But I'm not going to sit here and spout numbers and give a false impression that we're nearly at the finishing line. This is a massive piece of work to do. I think what Lady Ailish has done really powerfully is lay out, this is what the gold standard looks like. This is what you've got to aim at. And we will collectively work on what it will take for policing to get there as quickly as is practically possible.
Sir Mark Rowley. Now, supermarket giant Sainsbury's has announced around 1,500 jobs will be cut as part of a major plan to reduce costs. The supermarket is trying to save around £1 billion a year over the next 3 years, the chief executive saying he's making difficult but necessary decisions as the company moves into the next phase of its so-called strategy. Meanwhile, jobs at the contact centre in Widnes, in Cheshire and its in-store bakeries will all be affected. Hotels housing asylum seekers are costing the taxpayer £15 million a day, with Labour accusing the government of blowing its £1 billion budget. Treasury figures suggest the Home Office spent £4.3 billion more than budgeted on asylum accommodation last year. The Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says it demonstrates the complete chaos in the system. Now, the subject of assisted dying must be addressed, with MPs warning the government that a plan's needed if laws are passed on Jersey or the Isle of Man. Dame Esther Ranson is leading the calls for a fresh debate, even a referendum in the UK on the subject, saying the current legislation is simply a mess. She recently revealed she'd joined the Dignitas clinic in Switzerland after being diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. And the Prince of Wales has condemned a rise in anti-Semitism during a visit to a synagogue. Prince William said it has no place in society as he met young people and students in London. He was told about an increase in anti-Semitism since the Hamas attacks in October. It was his first public appearance since pulling out of a memorial service on Tuesday due to a personal matter. Hundreds of residents have had to move out of their homes in Aberdeen after they were found to contain dangerous, crumbling concrete known as RAAC. Around 500 houses were found to be affected, and Aberdeen City Council is now rehoming tenants from around 300 properties. Last year, schools and hospitals across the country were partially and fully closed when they were identified as being at risk of collapse for the same reason. And fines for parents taking children out of school without permission will rise across England from September. It's part of new efforts to boost school attendance following the pandemic. The minimum fine will increase from £60 to £80 per parent, and if parents fail to pay their fine within 21 days, that doubles. It comes after nearly 400,000 penalties were issued in 2022 for unauthorised school absences, which were higher than pre-COVID. And tributes have been paid for the TV chef and hairy biker star Dave Myers, who's died at the age of 66, less than 2 years after revealing his cancer diagnosis. Strictly Come Dancing star Karen Hauer has led the tributes to her former dance partner, calling him a dear friend. Countdown's Rachel Riley has remembered him as a great bloke. And Cy King, his motorcycling and cooking partner, revealed the news on social media, saying Dave had passed away peacefully at home. He said he can't put into words how he's feeling at the moment, but everyone who loved Dave is devastated. That's the news. For the latest stories, sign up for GB News Alerts, scan the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thanks very much for that, Polly. I am Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, I've got the former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, and the visiting professor at Staffordshire University, Tom Bewick. Good evening to both of you. You know the drill, don't you, on this programme as well? It's not just about us three, it's very much about you guys at home as well. What's on your mind tonight? You can get in touch with me all the usual ways, gbviews at gbnews.com, or you can tweet me, X me at gbnews. And what a treat for you, everybody. What an absolute treat. We do like it when they let me out and about. Well, of course, we know, don't we, that Wednesday is a big day for all of us. It is, of course, budget day. And we're going on the road, everybody. So you can come and join me and Nigel Farage. Live audience, how I love those. We're going to be in Whitehaven. You can get yourself over to gbnews.com or you can whip out your phones and take a picture of that QR code that was just on the screen. It's back now. There you go, as if by magic. And you can get your tickets. I'll give you all the details there. And if you are a GB News member, then you get a discount to come and see. Coming to see me and getting it at a discounted rate. What a treat for the nation. There's so much I want to talk to you about in this programme today. Of course, the migration figures, I'll come on to that in a second. The absolute mess that is Wayne Couzens. Even that name, it makes my skin crawl. It's disgusting. But I'm asking you, do you think changes will actually be made when it comes to policing? Because all these reports, they're fascinating, aren't they? But they mean absolutely nothing if change doesn't actually occur. Shall we start, though, by that big news out today when it comes to the migration figures? Are you sitting comfortably, everybody? Have you got yourself a cup of tea or something like that? Let's have a little look to see what's been going on. Because the Home Office have confirmed today that 1.4 million visas were granted. That was up 20%. It doesn't get much better, by the way, because I can tell you now that 337,240 overseas worker visas were issued. That was up 26%. There was 146,477 health and care visas. That was up 91%. 280 almost thousand dependent visas. That was up 80% as well. Cool, blimey. And just by the way, I've got to talk about the asylum claims as well, because 62,336, that was the number of asylum claims that were granted. That was up apparently 242%. I mean, this is not looking good for the Tories, Kelvin, is it?
No, and but it also doesn't look very good for our country, doesn't it? That we have literally millions of people who claim that they're sick or on long-term sick, and yet we can't get people to go into the health and care business. The other number in there which really astonished me was that the number of dependents that came in with people who had been granted. Now, why don't we do what they do in the Middle East, for instance, which is actually they take the single person who's going to do the job and they can send their money back, but they don't take in the whole of the family. And so, honestly, I wouldn't mind if our country was very wealthy, nor would I mind if we didn't have people to do these jobs. But is this going to be a problem simply for Rishi Sunak? Or is this a problem for the UK? I suspect it's a problem for the UK. And the minute that Starmer comes in, he will have even bigger problems than we've got already. The idea that it is a political issue is that what we don't have is politicians who are prepared to do something tough about it. Now, there may be 1,001 reasons why they won't do something tough about it, but the idea that it's either it's a Tory problem or it's a reform problem or it's a Labour problem seems to me ridiculous. We don't have people who want to do the right thing, I'm afraid. It's a shocker, an absolute shocker. I don't know why.
And, of course, the government will say, oh, you know, we've tried, we're making all these changes, and that hasn't filtered through to some of these stats yet. I'm sure that's what they would say if they were sitting here. But, Tom, what do you make to it?
Well, Calvin says it's not necessarily a party political point, but the fact is, since Brexit, this government did get control of our borders insofar as legal migration. I mean, those figures are 91% increase in health and social care visas. You're right, for every one of those workers coming in, there's 3 dependents that's coming in off the back of those visas, although the government from the 11th of March is actually going to be clamping down your point there about workers bringing family dependents. But I think for me, the real point here is that the government's failing twice. It's failing to ensure a proper managed migration system where these numbers are coming down, point number 1. Point number 2, it's failing as an employer because the vast majority of these work visas are in the health and social care sector. Why are we not paying enough to our domestic health and social care workers? Why are they going off and working in supermarkets rather than in our hospitals and in our care settings? Because the wages are lousy and they know they can exploit people coming from abroad with cheap wages.
And don't forget, I will never forget, actually, you remember tens of thousands of people in that sector. They were given the old heave-ho because they refused to have a vaccine, something that they didn't want. Well, where's all those people gone? Why have those people not been brought back into the fold? I suspect some of them would have told them where to put it, shall we say. But
it's almost impossible now to hire a UK worker into those industries, not least of all because under this system, and I don't particularly blame the care industry for it, they are allowed to pay 20% less to somebody from overseas to come and work for them rather than a UK employee. Now, I know about, within my own wider family, I know an example of somebody who applied for a job the other day and was told, absolutely, you've got no chance.
Yeah, Kelvin's all about the skills shortage occupation list, where basically you can hire from abroad, essentially at a discounted rate. We do seem to not value caring, though, in this country.
True.
So I cannot get my head around why we regard caring as essentially a minimum wage vocation. And I know there'll be people at home screaming at the telly going, minimum wage, Michelle, give me a break. Have you seen the carers allowance, for example? Chance would be a fine thing to get minimum wage. But why don't we value carers more?
Well, because we've allowed that to happen over recent decades. And the reason why we've allowed that to happen is because the Treasury, like the economic orthodoxy of the Treasury, is to keep on adding to the labour supply because it boosts the overall size of the economic cake, GDP. Meanwhile, what we've seen in the last 15 years is stagnating wages, not just of the health and social care sector, actually across many sectors of the economy. Secular stagnation is what economists call it. But the point is, our living standards are being driven down by this obsession of the Treasury to keep on adding to labour supply just to grow the size of the cake, GDP, instead of actually wrestling with the real structural problems in our labour market, which is it's a race to the bottom in too many sectors, and health and social care is a classic example of that.
Well, Suella Braverman, she's, of course, piped up today. So she took to Twitter saying 1.4 million people were granted visas here last year. Asylum approvals at record high. Work and student visa numbers, including many dependents, are appalling. This cannot go on. We don't have enough homes, GPs or schools to support this level. She goes on to say that the PM must adopt policies that I pushed for that would have prevented this national disaster. We need a cap on overall numbers. And then she ends by saying Britain will be unrecognisable if this carries on. It's not what the British people, including me, voted for. And that figure, by the way, I don't know if you heard in Polly Middlehurst's briefing there, the news bulletin, £15 million a day on things like the hotel costs. I mean, that is so insulting to British people, Kelvin, that go to work, that pay their taxes, that can't afford to put their own heating on, that are scrimping and saving in their own lives, that perhaps miss meals, etc., that can't get into doctors, to know that their tax is going on, in some cases, things like 4-star hotels it has been. It is a damn insult to them.
It is. I mean, one of the issues that she raised there was that we are challenged, as we all know, not enough schools outside London, strangely, which is actually shutting down as everybody takes flight. GPs, not enough homes being built, actually, to be truthful. There is enough work, but we fill them up, as you were correctly saying, Tom, actually with people from other nations around the world. So our issue is, that point that she makes is our country will become not recognisable. Strangely, that's kind of heading towards kind of Enoch Powell area, right? But, however, I noticed on my own Twitter that most people are piling in against Suella Bravo and saying, well, you were the blinking Home Secretary. How come you didn't do anything about it? And, of course, eventually, in truth, she was slung out because she wanted to do something about it. But that expression, unrecognisable, honestly, if you carried out a piece of research now, I'm just guessing here, on the poll of 1, right, I suspect there would be quite a few people who would chime in with that thought process.
Of course.
But that's why, look, there has to be democratic consent for the managed migration system we have, which I do believe has got out of control in more recent years. Yes, there are one-off factors. No one's saying we should return Ukrainians fleeing a war in Europe. No one's saying that we shouldn't offer refuge to Hong Kong British nationals who have come here. They make up for a large amount of the figure. But where I absolutely disagree with Braverman's right-wing rhetoric on this, which does, as you say, have these overtones of Enoch Power, and there are other Conservative commentators who are equally dancing and flirting with that kind of rhetoric. It's back to your point at the start, Calvin. Regardless of who's in power, this is a country with an ageing population. We're going to need migration, point number 1. Second point is, obviously, the government's got to sort out its own sector, like health and social care, where the vast majority of these worker visas are going, to make sure that we value the sector more. And one good way of doing that is by paying our social care workers. And that might mean, by the way, a new health and social care levy. I would get rid of national insurance because it's just another form of income tax. We need a debate in this country about how we actually fund long-term our health and social care system.
Do you think, though, that this is not really about money? Because we are very lucky. In my lifetime, we've gone down from number 3 in the world down to about number 6 or 7 in the world. Even so, we are wealthy, right? We are creating a lot of money. Apportioning capital, which is a private equity kind of expression, God knows what it's doing in this debate, right, is the job of the government, right? So what is it that is going slightly wrong? Is it that everybody's got their hand out, nobody wants to work, they've all got mental health difficulties, which we're going to deal with later on in the show, I think, right? Or is it that it is impossible in a democracy to supply bad news? Have we got to the point where anybody who turns around and says, we are going to do this, for instance, we're going to push back, anybody who comes on a boat, crosses into us, we're literally going to turn it back. And if some people die, then we're prepared to take the hit on that. Would anybody ever say that?
No.
Right, and yet, in that case, we have to accept the consequences.
Yeah, and I would argue, actually, that one of the reasons that none of the politicians have got the chops to be able to do that, the media plays quite a crucial role in all of this. Because if you imagine, like, being a politician in this day and age, I do not envy these people. It's easy to criticise them. But, you know, they come up with an idea, they whatever, change it. The second that they then amend something, they're piled on for doing a U-turn, so they're getting absolutely battered by the press if they try and change their course. If any politician you wouldn't even be able to get the sentence out as a politician, we're going to consider turnbacks. You wouldn't get that sentence in its entirety out because you would be called every single name under the sun. The politicians would panic. Their 12-year-old advisors would panic and they would be changing course quicker than a quick thing from Quickland.
So what is the answer? Tom, you're to the left of me. Come on, you must have an answer.
It's a nuanced and complex debate, but there's absolutely one thing that Parliament should be doing, and that is, in my view, setting annual quotas for these worker visas, because that way MPs can't run away from the accountability. We now own our migration system. Our MPs need to be accountable for it.
Well, of course, but isn't that, this whole quotas and caps, isn't this just such basic kind of common sense? If you enable people to just ad infinitum recruit cheaper labour from overseas, well, why wouldn't they do that? We was talking the other day about fruit picking and whatnot. Many people got in touch and said, Michelle, I used to do fruit picking, but now a lot of these farms, they have these caravans on there now. So you have all of these foreign workers at a lower reduced wage living in caravans on site. So how on earth are you going to change all of that? Get in touch and let me know your thoughts. Coming up next, Wayne Couzens, what an absolute scumbag. We shall be talking about the failings that went wrong there. And crucially, I want to know, do you trust, actually, that anyone really has learnt lessons and that all this stuff wouldn't actually happen again? I'll see you in 2.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
I appreciate the story isn't in today's papers, but it has been running all week, and it's
Yes.
this row over the use of nitrogen hypoxia to kill this man who was on death row in Alabama.
Yeah.
And it's been linked back to you, and I wanted to ask you about it because this is intriguing, because you did a television show back in 2015 where you, I believe, tested this method of execution. Just tell me briefly about it, Michael. What happened?
I didn't test this method of execution, and it was a bit longer ago than that. But what I did do was test hypoxia. So I tested various ways in which people are killed in the United States, and asked the question as to whether there was a more humane way of doing it. So I was put into hypoxic situations, for example, into a chamber run by the Netherlands Air Force, which simulated what happens if you're in an aircraft at 30,000 feet and suddenly the windows blow out. And what happened to me was that I was almost instantly rendered incapable. As an experiment, I was trying to play with children's toys, putting triangle shapes into triangle spaces, and I was quickly unable to do that. I was asked, what is 9 minus 5? And I said 5. And then the officer who was with me, the Air Force officer who was wearing an oxygen mask, said to me, Michael, put your mask on or you will die. And I was incapable of putting my own mask on. Now, this suggested that hypoxia was very fast acting, and that you had... Obviously, I was in no pain or anything like that. I was just completely unaware. By the way, this is why, if you're on an aircraft and it depressurizes, you must put your own mask on first. But of course, I can't go on and draw conclusions.
No.
We did not experiment with nitrogen. But what I can say is it was evident to me that hypoxia renders you incapable almost instantaneously.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel. So join me, Tom Harwood, for the Rochdale by-election results. From midnight through to 6 a.m, we'll discover the twists and turns of the most unpredictable by-election in a long time.
You should be celebrating. I slept during it, you know.
And from 6 a.m. Friday, join Michael Portillo on GB News Breakfast for his take on the results. GB News, Britain's election channel.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. The former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, and the visiting professor at Staffordshire University, Tom Buick, remain alongside me. You know, so many people are getting in touch about why we don't value and respect care workers in this country. Jeff says, well, my partner works in care. She only gets minimum wage, but there's also things like she's only allowed to eat microwaved meals because she's not allowed to use the client's oven. I don't understand, Jeff. So she microwaves her meals in the client's kitchens, but she can't use the oven. I need a further explanation on that one. Clive, he's got a theory. He says wages are depressed in the social care sector because people like Rishi Sunak regard it as, I quote, woman's work, and therefore feel that they can pay them less than men. I'm not sure that that's the case, actually. Of course, men get paid the same wage for doing that job as well. A couple of people saying people don't want to do that job, Michelle. It's back-breaking work. It's very kind of intimate and all the rest of it. So the attention and the attraction and the appeal for those kind of roles perhaps isn't there. Keep your thoughts coming in. For now, though, let's talk Sarah Everard's killer. I mean, he's absolutely disgusting, this person. You all know his name by now, Wayne Couzens. He obviously spending the rest of his life in prison. Good. I'm going to upset loads of people now, but honestly, sometimes I think if there's ever a call for things like a return to the death penalty, that fella, for me, would be right up there in the front of the queue, because he didn't just kill Sarah Everard, did he? He undermined the whole kind of sector, if you like, of policing now, because so many women in particular, when you see a police officer now, you've got something in the back of your mind that would make you think, do I trust that person? Do I trust that individual and what they're telling me and all the rest of it? So he did so much harm, much more beyond his crime. But anyway, let's just remind ourselves, because this is the first part of 3, this report that's out today. And here is the inquiry chairwoman, Lady Eilish Anerjli, I think that's how you pronounce it. Let's have a listen to what she had to say.
Crucially, the report shows how police recruitment and vetting failed to spot red flags about Cousin's unsuitability. Red flags were repeatedly ignored, meaning he was granted the privilege of serving in 3 separate police forces. There is nothing to stop another wing Cousins operating in plain sight.
Lady Angelini, that was. Let's also listen to James Cleverly. He responded too.
Tragically, the report identifies that Cousins was completely unsuitable to serve as a police officer, and worse still, that there were multiple occasions where this could have been recognised.
You know what, let's make it a hat-trick as well. Let's listen to Mark Rowley and what he had to say in response.
This report it paints a deeply disturbing picture of us starting from an astonishingly low base. I think what Lady Eilish has done really powerfully is lay out, this is what the gold standard looks like, this is what you've got to aim at, and we will collectively work on what it will take for policing to get there as quickly as is practically possible.
I mean, I sit here, honestly.
Can I say something about that?
Yeah.
About Mark Rowley? That was a shocking thing he said there. Absolutely shocking. He has been, where did he think he'd get all that scramble from? He's been around the Met now all his career. He knows for sure, right from the minute he came into it, that there were wrong uns in there, right? That he has done absolutely sweet FA about the vetting procedure, which actually, if you look at this report, which is a shocking document, right? It basically says from the moment he came into the police force, whether it was at Kent, that civil nuclear area, or it was the Met, he should have failed at every area, including apparently flashing 3 times from about 2015. Look, and yet you get somebody like Rowley coming on, oh, this is where we want to get to, this is where we want to get to. In a funny way, it's the same issue about migration, because somebody won't stand up and simply say, if we scrap that. Now, what that may mean, by the way, if they have vetting of a high standard, do you know what will happen?
Yeah.
We'll have no police officers, because actually many of the police officers, I suspect, might fail some of those areas. And some of other people who are attracted to the police may not then go into it either. It's a massive problem.
Tom?
What I find disturbing is that nobody's resigned today or taken accountability for what is an absolutely shocking report. 360 pages. As you say, Calvin, there were at least 3 attempts that this individual made in terms of applications to the police service and was rejected and came back into the police service via this special constable volunteering route. And it's just worth, for our viewers, Michelle, just reading out something else actually on page 6 of the report, that had those responsible for police vetting not allowed the process to usurp their independent thought and curiosity, concerns may not have held the office. Cousins, I should say, would not have held the office of police constable. I mean, how damning is that of the whole recruitment process? In other words, it was probably, taking the knee to these HR processes that so many leaders and managers now are expected to do, instead of actually, as they did on some occasions, trust their gut instinct and say, this guy's a wrong-un, he shouldn't be in the police service. But no one's been held to account for those failings.
What about anybody who's in the police force now? One of the issues that we face in our country is that, as far as I do not know police officers. Do you know police officers?
I do.
No, I don't personally.
OK. Tom?
I do. And most of them are really good.
And how do you know them? As neighbours or as...
As neighbours and also as friends. And I can tell you, most police officers understand that not only do we have a system of policing in this country by the public's consent, but also they need to act in the public interest. And what was really concerning, when I did read the Angelini report as well, is that there were some officers within the Met Police who were advancing a theory about Wayne Couzens, that he was a bad apple, the bad apple theory.
Well, they used to call him the rapist.
Well,
that was his nickname.
He was called that. But in the same unit that Couzens served in, David Carrick, who's also been, by the way, investigated by this inquiry.
That's one of the extra parts of this report.
Yes, he was convicted of 49 crimes, including rape. So how, in any way, can this be seen as a bad apple theory?
So let's address that. The police themselves, colleagues know that when they mean bad apple, they mean criminal, a serious criminal who is carrying out the very crimes which they are arresting other people for. So why is it within the police force, it's quite clear within the Met, why is it that they don't do anything about it? What is stopping? I'm a great admirer of the cops. I love seeing them. If I see them at Waterloo Station, my heart, I go like that. But what is it about being a police officer that stops them acting against their own? What is it?
Well, do you know that... I can tell you now, actually, I know some of my audience, and I know that I have a great deal of serving police officers, retired police officers, former police officers. So answer that question, if you will. Did you know ever that there was a wrong among your kind of colleagues, and did you do anything about it? One of the things that I find quite interesting is that when you look at Wayne Couzens, literally just a few days before he went on to do that appalling act to Sarah Everard, he'd apparently flashed again. I think this was like the third time now, going through a drive-through. They knew, right? So they had his car registration. And this is how blatant he is. Right? I can't even... It's so disgusting. He went in his own car, flashing, paid for his meal on his own credit card. He knew that nobody was going to do anything about it. And there is this thing in society where there are attacks and assaults and all the rest of it on women. And I don't think they are taken seriously. Because somebody somewhere is just sitting there, they're going, oh, yeah, there's this fella, he's got his bits out for a woman, like, put it as a low priority. But actually, a lot of these people, that's how they start. They don't wake up one day and just become a mass murderer. They start gradually. And it makes me think how important it is. I'm going on a random tangent, but it's linked. The other day, when I saw that trans person that was a man that had murdered another man, and all the media, they're all going around in circles talking about, oh, this woman has done this to this man. I'm screaming at the television, and I'm like, it's not a woman, it was a man that murdered another man. And it's so important for me, Tom, because actually you need to be accurate when you're collecting crime statistics so that you have a proper picture about male to female violence. What are men getting up to in society? And I don't mean to be rude, because I know you're all men, so don't worry, I'm not painting all men. But when you start lying and being dishonest and saying, you're calling an actual man a woman, and then you're tracking things and logging things as though it's a female getting up to some of these things, you're asking for trouble.
But the media are to blame. The media are to blame. Sky News was referring to that particular killer as she.
Yes.
Right? It's she. What is wrong with Sky News? It's a massive corporation. It's part of a big company. Don't they know the difference between a male killer? And J.K. Rowling was right. And I tell you what, that Guardian writer, she quit. She quit over it, and virtually the Guardian paid lip service to changing the 5th paragraph and changed the word woman out of it. There is something wrong with our media in this country. You know what it is? What? It's because they're scared of losing the advertising. Right? But if they start being on the wrong side of those arguments.
Coming back to this shocking report today, if you don't mind, I'm going to avoid going down the transgender media hole.
Why?
Well, not because I don't have a problem with biological sex and scientific facts. It's just that I think this is a really, really important report, because actually we don't want this to happen to any young woman again, do we? And the fact is, it's something actually that Yvette Cooper said today, the Shadow Home Secretary. She's sick and tired. I think the country is sick and tired of these systemic failings. We have these reports, we have umpteen recommendations, we have the likes of Sir Mark Rowley that turns up on our TV screens and says, oh, we're going to go for gold standard, this is never going to happen again. And then months later, we find that young women cannot enjoy going out and find those safe spaces and all the rest of it. And I don't want to put anybody off their tea or their dinner this evening, Michelle, but actually, Lady Eilish does address your point about what is it about these predatory men who show the signs very early on. They're sexual predators. She talks about things like, masturbatory indecency and how we need to get training into the National Police College to even understand what that is and to take action against it.
Well, I mean, what do you really need to go to some kind of in-depth college course to realise that when a man... I mean, we had a case in Hull that many of you will be familiar with, Libby Squire. She was murdered, again, in an awful way. And when you trace the guy back that did it, he was going up to people's windows and he was doing things. I'll let you use your imagination because it's tea time and kids are watching. He was doing things and he got away with it, and momentum gains, and then they push the boundaries, and then they need to get their kicks in different ways. It's disgusting.
And so is this former police officer, but that's the point. Where is the training? Where is the understanding? But importantly, given what happened to that drive-through restaurant, and a police officer was fired as a result of it, that case was reported, that indecency, several days before what happened to Seven.
I know.
So it was completely avoidable.
But this is my point.
Tragic death that was completely avoidable.
So you tell me at home, because it absolutely was avoidable. So the question that I've got for you all at home, do you trust that changes will be made and that this kind of thing will not happen again? I don't trust that. Am I wrong? If so, tell me why. After the break, let's talk non-DOMs. Is it time to scrap the non-DOM tax status in this country or not? See you then.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Elon Musk has announced that the first patients to receive a groundbreaking brain implant from Neuralink is recovering well.
This is all a bit odd. The product, called telepathy, uses a robot to surgically place a computer chip in a region of the brain that controls movement.
Yes, Elon Musk says that the first goal is to enable people to control a phone or a computer just by thinking. He says that initial tests show promising signs of brain activity, meaning that patients with paralysis could one day overcome their conditions.
Not sure about this one. Joining us to discuss this breakthrough is applied futurist Tom Cheesewright. Tom, this sounds, well, slightly terrifying.
I certainly think a lot of people will be thinking this is something out of a sci-fi horror rather than reality. But this is a technology that's been a long time coming. We've been developing direct brain-computer interfaces for a long time, mostly for the sort of therapeutic reasons that are the initial goal, at least, of Elon Musk's Neuralink, to allow people who are perhaps quadriplegic to have direct control via their brains of initially a smartphone and maybe ultimately artificial limbs or a wheelchair.
It does seem fascinating how quickly this technology is moving on. I saw demonstrations perhaps a year or two ago of people playing a very simple Pong game just by thinking, moving sort of one line on a screen up and down. This seems like potentially there has been a breakthrough that means far more complex things can be controlled just by thinking.
Well, there's lots of different aspects to this technology. The initial attempts to interface with the brain used actually quite thick prongs almost that went into the brain, and they were quite solid, and so if the brain moved, they could potentially cause damage.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7. The former editor of The Sun, Kelvin Mackenzie, and the visiting professor at Staffordshire University, Tom Buick, remain alongside me. Jeff says, I'm a retired police officer and I can tell you every single police force currently employ criminally convicted officers. And that is in the here and now. He says, in my day, you'd have been kicked straight out. Paul says, Michelle, what you've got to understand is the average copper is frightened of being called a grass. And that's why some of the wrong uns are not being called out. Doug says, I'm a retired officer and I can't understand how so many rogues are being allowed in the first place. He says, when he joined back in the day, all the checks and balances were in place and you basically wouldn't have stepped foot over the door and been able to. So many people, Mike says, the normal person is being failed by the police daily. Oh, you know, I've got to say, as a woman, no offence to any officers, but if I was driving along and some police car pulled up and some fella got out, this officer got out and said to me, can you get out your car? I wouldn't, because I wouldn't trust that that person was a police officer. So then what do you do with someone like me in that situation? Answers on a postcard, please. Anyway, look, the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, he is now considering scrapping or scaling back the non-dom tax. I found this absolutely fascinating because this is Labour's kind of speciality dish, isn't it? This is the drum that they bang. So for the Tories to consider scrapping this, it will be interesting. But let's just kind of, let's just look. What a non-dom is, by the way, is when you're essentially resident somewhere else, but you're living here, and it's all about whether or not you have to pay your tax on overseas earnings in this country or not. Do you think we should scrap the non-dom?
No, I don't actually. And the idea that Hunt, who I have a massive question mark about as our Chancellor anyway, is so desperate in order to in some odd way, try and find threepence down the back of the sofa, that we're going to adopt some rather socialist... in fact, it is. I mean, there are only two socialist policies, as far as I know, in related to finance, and this is one of them. Right. At the end of the day, these are very rich people, OK? They can go anywhere. They can go anywhere, off to Monaco. I like them here. I like them buying big houses. I like them going to expensive restaurants. I like them having big cars. I like them having chauffeurs and butlers and all that kind of thing. They can have as much as they like, right? After all, the amount of tax... They will pay tax in this country because actually they're clever people and they will have earned something. So actually, they are the kind of people we want in our country. We've got enough of the scum. We've got enough of the skint and the dim. I like having wealthy people. The fact that they live a life that you can only dream about, I don't mind. I do not like this idea.
So Calvin, God bless him, has just given the red-top tabloid defence. These rich people, they'll go somewhere else.
Yeah,
no, they won't. They love their Mayfair clubs too much. They love their big houses in London and the South East.
Some of them
They
do.
come here for the creativity and the culture. And as you were saying there, Michelle, the issue here is, in terms of the non-dom status, it's people who actually, for all intents and purposes, they live here just like you do, Calvin, at the moment, and I do, and millions of other people do in the country. So why should they have a special tax deal? Those doctors, those nurses, those social care workers...
It's earnings that are not earning.
Come on. They will have enough wealth that they are creating wealth and creating employment in our country.
That is absolute bunkum. And I tell you what,
show
you would
me...
not accuse... Well, no, I will show you.
Where's the stats then? Where's the stats then?
Let him tell you then. Go on, Tom.
Well, you would hardly accuse the United States of being socialist, communist or whatever. They have a policy in terms of your annual tax return. It's why, by the way, Boris Johnson gave up his US citizenship, where you are taxed on your worldwide income. Why don't we have a policy here of taxing people on their worldwide income? Sure, because we've got double taxation treaties. You can choose which jurisdiction you want to be taxed in. So, for example, Rishi Sunak's wife, she could choose to be taxed in India rather than taxed here in the UK. But the point is,
Could I just say that argument has there's no scrutiny of that argument that's worth anything. I wish we had the American tax system, right? We'd have no inheritance tax unless you're making 20 million quid, and actually the tax system works. I absolutely, if you're saying I have to give up my non-dom view for the American tax system. No. Fantastic. I'd do that
the Tories
in a
now are going to bring it in, the con-socialists.
Well, I certainly hope not, and that will be another reason why Jeremy Hunt gets slung out at Godalming in November.
Yeah, well, you know who proposed this move? It was George Osborne, the austerity.
Well, exactly. Who would want him?
Said, why don't you go and steal Labour's clothes?
Who would want him? He's trying to persuade the country that we should have an Arab dictatorship in the Daily Telegraph. I'm pleased. I'm not in favour of George Osborne.
This will raise £3.6 billion for schools, hospitals.
They won't. They'll all leg it. It'll raise 3 and 9pence.
Yeah, I've got to say that figure is disputed, and that figure also depends on all of those people staying in this country.
Many of them will.
Well,
some will.
Are you one of them, by the way? Are there any random non-doms that are minted watching this, perhaps, in a Mayfair club? Get in touch and tell me if this tax change that Tom wants to see comes in. Would you stay or would you go? Coming up after the break, I promise you, is one of the most ridiculous things that you will have heard in a long time. And that, my friends, is saying something. See you in 2.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Marnie says being sexy in business is entirely possible and maybe even better.
Well, Marnie, this is something I say is true. I've had to live with this for quite a long time, and I think you can do both. Now, tell me, it's lovely to see you first of all.
Thank you for having me.
In all your gorgeousness. And you're telling me that often is regarded as something derogatory or something to hold you back. Is that right?
It's just this really unfair thing, this really unfair narrative that women can't do both. Even men can do it. As you know, Eamon, you can do it. You can do it all. And I just think, you know, women are so multifaceted. They can be mothers, they can be sexy, they can be businesswomen, they can be silly, they can be all these different dimensions. And this press push that we have to limit ourselves to one category, it's just unfair.
But do you think that is where some people may be wrong-footed or go wrong to underestimate you?
Exactly. There is that saying, disarm with charm. So, you know, that there is that idea that people do look at someone who cares about how they look, who's perhaps a bit feminine, and underestimate them. But hopefully I proved that wasn't the case in the boardroom. And thank goodness for Karen Brady. She's definitely upped the glam stakes on the show. And if anybody can prove that you can be sexy and successful in business, I suppose it's her, really. But where do you think most of the criticism comes from? Because I have to say, hard to believe, but when I was younger, I certainly got a bit of this at my old employer, being told that I had to dress a certain way, not to be too sexy, which I found hugely
you were told this by women.
I was told this by a female boss who didn't like me wearing zips on the back of my dress. Not just me, but some of the other presenters there. And I took such offence. I felt like she thought that I was some sort of, I don't know what. Do you take offence when people are criticising you that, you know, in some way they think you're, I don't know? There's just no right answer. And as we said, I think Karen Brady is doing an excellent job at leading the charge that you can be glamorous and get the job done.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, I've got Tom Buick and Kelvin Mackenzie, but strange things have happened in the break because Kelvin has finally let loose and Kelvetta is in his place.
Hello.
The false eyelashes are on.
They are.
Batch your eyelashes for me, Kelvin. Look at that, everybody. Look at him. You could work as some kind of panto dame or something like that.
Yeah, well, that you know, I'm always looking out for fresh venture ideas. And...
What I've not told Kelvin is that when we've applied these fake eyelashes to Kelvin, we've done so in glue that lasts a month. I've not told him that bit yet, so you'll be seeing all his appearances with those things on his face. Anyway, there's a serious reason that Kelvin is donning his falsies tonight, everyone, because there is a school in Kent, right? I promise you, this is so ridiculous. A letter has been sent to parents now basically saying that for considerations of pupils' mental health and the fact that so many students were taking time off to have eyelashes applied during school time, the school has now decided to allow false eyelashes to be worn at school. I have very strong opinions on this, not least because I find it absurd. But Kelvin, where are you on this?
Well, first of all,
I wish you could all see him as close up as I could see him.
Yeah,
Go on.
Right. So the fundamental issue is this. This head teacher has said that his pupils are suffering from mental health trauma because they aren't allowed to wear it. Where is the proof of that? I mean, if somebody says it to you, it doesn't mean to say it's true. And what do? Go and get a psychiatrist or a counsellor to come and teach you? And secondly, now this head has said it, I don't know what the rules are in schools. It's all right for you. This is Michelle the bully, by the way. She insisted if I was to come on tonight, I had to wear these false eyelashes. It's absolutely ludicrous.
That's not true. He rang me up, he went, "Oh, Michelle, please, please, can I wear my eyelashes tonight?"
That is wholly untrue.
I said, "No, you can't, Kelvin." And he said, "But what about my mental health?" And then I thought to myself, "Oh, go on then, I'll have to let him do it."
OK, but what's going to happen to the rest of the country now? Because this story appeared in the Times this morning, and I presume a whole load of other head teachers will read this, and that they will allow it as well. And doesn't it play to the argument that the mental health card is used by the young now at every moment in order to win a debate that they should normally lose? Isn't this a bad sign, A, for that head teacher, who I think has made a mistake, and also bad for teachers, bad for the
You're
children?
involved in education.
I am, and I'm struggling also just because I'm looking right at Calvin.
That won't be the first time.
Who, by the way, there are viewers of a certain vintage who will remember Rainbow, Zippy, George and Bungle, and I'm looking at George, it feels to me. Right. I don't know whether we can get that up on
People would wish
screen.
that it was more like Zippy. They'd be able to see his mouth.
George. I mean, I think there he is. Look at that.
Oh, yeah,
what about my mental health?
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Don't bully him.
Yeah. But look, serious point is this, and it really does come back to what the head teacher said, who, in that letter, and I quote, said, because of changes in society, the whole point of school uniform, which goes back decades in this country and in some other countries around the world, is that it's about giving our kids a level playing field to ensure that actually they can escape from the brand police, they can escape from the fashionistas that might be in their playground saying, well, we haven't got the latest this and the latest that. No, I think it's absolutely the wrong move. I don't allow my teenage daughters to go out the house to school with these eyelashes on, and I just think...
You do realise, probably, that the second they get round the corner and they're not in eyesight of you, you do realise that they're probably sticking them on their eyes.
No, because they go to a very good local comprehensive school that ensures that because it's about the head teacher, it's about the leadership in the school to ensure that actually people are not collapsing to changes in society.
Is this head teacher who has unleashed eyelashes now probably all over schools all over the country, does he feel pressure, A, from his governors, B, from his local education authority, when he reveals what percentage of his pupils are not turning up for school, and he's looking around for an excuse for this, and he says, oh, it's the eyelashes, right? Is that what the game is? I can't understand why on earth can it be in his interest to have this opprobrium poured on him and his school, simply rather than doing the right thing and saying, no, you're not going to do it. Have you heard of another school that said this?
Look, these things quite rightly are set at the level of the school, right? But just that inconsistency is a problem. I'm not in favour, by the way, of the Department for Education issuing statutory guidance on something like eyelashes, but just some common sense, Calvin. I mean,
and some good parents parenting.
And some good
Why are you
parenting, common
letting your
sense.
children miss school to go and get false eyelashes applied? I hate to break this to everyone, but these kind of salons, they open on a Saturday as well. So if you insist on your kids going to school like that, I mean, use your weekend, surely. No? Look, that is all I have got time for. Thank you very much for the conversation with you guys at home tonight, and also thank you to you, Tom. I'm trying to take you very seriously, but thank you to you, Kelvin. If anyone wants to carry on the conversation with Kelvin, he is available on his OnlyFans page for, I think, about the next hour. But for now, Nadia Faraj up next. Night.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening, Alex Burgill here with your latest GB News weather forecast. After a wet day in the southeast, that rain is going to clear away, and that will lead to a touch of frost in some places before a swathe of more heavy, persistent rain pushes into parts of the southwest through the early hours in association with a system that's currently feeding its way in from the Atlantic. Ahead of that, and like I said, there will be some clear skies allowing for some frost to develop, and we also need to watch out for some patches of fog and freezing fog first thing on Friday morning, and temperatures for many likely to drop close to, if not below freezing in a few prone rural spots. The most unsettled weather tomorrow morning will be across parts of the southwest and into Wales. Heavy rain here and also some snow over modest higher ground, likely to cause some disruption, particularly to travel. Also a little bit of flooding possible as well. That rain then feeds further north and eastwards, lying across northern parts of England as we head into the afternoon. A scattering of showers with some sunny spells developing across much of England and Wales. The best sunshine there across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Temperatures for many a little on the chilly side, especially when you consider tomorrow is the first day of meteorological spring. As we look towards Saturday, and it's a bit of a messy day, there will be some outbreaks of showery rain around, and there could still be some winteriness, particularly over any modest higher ground. At the moment, it looks like Sunday is going to be a drier day for many of us, but do watch out for some rain in the southeast and more wet weather to come as we go into the start of next week, particularly on Monday. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World, Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones, who's the clinical lead for Care After Combat.
Yep.
Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system and...
So there's quite a high population of ex-servicemen and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. Yeah. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially just as a scoping exercise, really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily, it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course, the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offending behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr. Jane, and I guess for some people, the odd tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Yeah. Absolutely. So, speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol to manage some of those thoughts and feelings.
Yeah. Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This morning we got the Home Office annual migration figures. Prepare yourself for a shock. We'll give you the full numbers and wonder, can the Conservative Party turn this round? A look ahead to the budget. Next Wednesday, the Tories now hinting they might do a U-turn on non-doms, just really to steal one of Labour's policies. Is that what a Tory Chancellor really should be doing? And Rishi Sunak speaks at a predominantly Jewish